Today, I am so excited to share a special guest with you, Mangala Holland, who is a friend and someone I really respect in the coaching world for what she is doing. Mangala is a women's empowerment and sexuality coach and a facilitator of global group programs. She's on a mission to help pussy owners become empowered through loving themselves fiercely, celebrating their sexuality, and overcoming the fear, guilt, and shame that keeps them playing small. Having over a decade's experience in the industry, her superpower is helping female-bodied folks become deeply connected to their body, pleasure, and orgasmic confidence, which is the natural birthright of everyone. She's currently training the next generation of embodied female pleasure facilitators and places a strong emphasis on self-love, embodiment, and empowerment in her work, teaching in a no bullshit, fluff-free, grounded, dogma-free style. And this is definitely something that I love about you, Mangala, and why I wanted to bring you on board is because when I describe you to people, I say she's in the female embodiment and sexuality space, but she's just so grounded in the way she presents her work. And I just love your style. So this is
Thank
your
you.
formal intro, but can you kick us off and just tell us a little bit more? And I know that you got some amazing stories to share, and we'll just riff on from there.
Yeah. Kind of like where do we start here? But yeah, just by way of introduction, as it said in my bio, I've been in this world for a long time, so it's coming up to 14 years of being in sexuality world and my own personal journey in the spiritual world, and I've been teaching for 9 years now. So I've seen a lot of shifts in this industry over this time, and thankfully, as things feel like sexuality feels like this is for many people it's the missing piece of the jigsaw, and it's so intimately connected with everything else in our lives. So it's connected to our sense of who we are, our sense of power, our sense of boundaries, how we feel about our body, and all the really intimate stuff as well. So I see that it really connects in with everything else, and I've had my own journey with that as well. I wasn't multi-orgasmic from day one. I had to do a lot of healing and a lot of clearing work to get to the point where I could really tap into pleasure and confidence and everything else. So yeah.
Well, one of the things that I always love to share is definitely about your work, but the journey to how you came across to teaching this work in the way that you do, because I know that you're quite outspoken about some of the things that are available out there. I don't even really know how to word it. So perhaps if you take us through your journey of where you were back then and some of the things that you experienced and why you teach the way you do now.
Yeah. So there's a lot in there. So back in the day, I was living in the UK, and I was in the corporate world. So I was working in stockbrokers, and before that it was legal firms, and I never felt like I fitted in. It was just something I was doing to make money so I could go out and party at the weekends. And I was also DJing during the week as well, and weekends. So I was leading this real double life, and going to work in the day in this stiff little suit, and just all people cared about was earning money for old white men earning more money for other old white men. And I was just like, this is really not this is killing my soul. And especially I was traveling all over the country delivering software to these old white men, and staying in hotels a lot of the time, and just like it was kind of like being a traveling salesman. It was just like really not nourishing me at all, and it got to a point where basically I burnt out, and I realized I was deeply unhappy and that something had to change. And so, I mean, I thought I really overdid it one weekend, and I'd had way too many drugs, and I thought I was having a heart attack. It actually turned out to be a panic attack, and I managed to self-soothe myself out of that experience. And as I was self-soothing myself, a voice literally came into my head that said, stop all this shit and take up yoga. And it was like a switch got flicked. So that week, I mean, that was it. That was the end of the, I still carried on DJing, but I would drink cups of tea behind the decks rather than beer. And my lifestyle changed. And I took up yoga within a few days of that experience, and that started to lead me down this path of inquiry. So within probably a year of that experience, I quit my job. I decided to go overseas for a year and go travel and go deeper into yoga and meditation, and just go on this healing journey and discovery, and just follow the threads. Well, that led to me exploring Neotantra and unpacking stuff around my sexuality. And I ended up staying overseas for 12 years in the end, and I only came back to the UK last year. So it was a big journey. And while I was exploring sexuality, I realized that at the core of my disconnect from myself was I didn't love myself. In fact, I hated myself, and I didn't love my body, and I was completely disconnected from any sense of pleasure. I was holding a lot of shame and shut down. And so that was the real core of the work that I had to go through and unravel. And as I say, I fell into what was called Neotantra. So it's like working on sexuality. But it turned out that the environment I was in was pretty culty, and I was in an environment that was very hierarchical. There was a lot of brainwashing, which I obviously didn't realize until I got to the end of that journey. I was in that school for 5 years, and I was right in it. I was actually operations manager of the school. I was a senior teacher. I was as deep in as it's possible to be. And during that time, I was abused by my guru, and many other women were as well. There was a lot of manipulation of women, and a lot of very narrow perception of what was considered feminine and what was considered masculine. And it was so incredibly damaging. And I went public with the abuse and lost all my community. But it was, what that did was, as I started to unravel and unpack that conditioning, it gave me, I started to work more with embodiment and started training with some amazing teachers who gave me the skills and the tools to be able to really inquire, well, what's my truth? What feels right for me? Instead of being told what to feel, it was this beautiful journey of self-discovery. And so I already had, I was already trained as a sexuality teacher, and I'd been teaching yoga for many years at that point, and running workshops on sexuality and female pleasure. But I had to unlearn everything I'd been taught about what it meant to be a sensual being, or what it, what's my experience of being female, and what does it mean, and what, and asking all these deep questions. And so as I came out of that environment, I wanted to really create a space where women and people with vulvas can basically learn this stuff from other women and people with vulvas, where there's no power games, where it's, how can we create the safest space possible for people to explore their sexuality without causing them harm and without creating more trauma in their systems, and to give them the tools to go at their own pace rather than being pushed over any edges, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's very ungrounded, quite dangerous. There's a lot of people who haven't been trained who are teaching sexuality, and they're causing more harm than good. And so I wanted to offer something that was very, very far away from that, and also where people my age and older feel welcome and included, that it's not, you don't have to be some pretty young flowy Bali chick to explore your sexuality. This is something for every single human. And how can we create a space for that? So that's, in a nutshell, that's been my journey.
Well, can we just explore a little bit more about the Neo-Tantra world and what does this
Mm,
mean? Like, is there a healthy Neo-Tantra world? What is Tantra? Um, can you dive into a little bit more? Like,
mm,
maybe someone's listening who is in this space who is actually experiencing the abuse. Like, what is the kind of abuse that happens in these
mm.
spaces?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. So look, I'll start by just making some distinctions. So Tantra is a bit of a buzzword and it's become very popular. And there's a lot of people, because a lot of people are seeking more fulfillment. They're seeking sexual healing. They're seeking to expand, to feel whole, it's that sense of like, oh, I feel like there should be something more than what I'm experiencing, but I don't know what it is. And that's what leads a lot of people to want to discover and explore more, and that's a healthy inquiry. Tantra is basically a system. There is Buddhist Tantra and there is Hindu Tantra. So it's an Eastern, it's more than a philosophy. It's a whole science. It's a whole spiritual construct, if you like. It's a way of exploring the world, and it's basically saying that we are not separate from divinity and that everything is one. So it's a non-dual concept. Now that's the classical tantra philosophy. Neo-tantra is something that emerged in the 60s from Osho and those kind of teachers that basically made it all about sexuality. So in classical tantra, like a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction is about sexuality, and you wouldn't even get to touch that until you were a very, very experienced practitioner. The rest of it is very specific rituals and meditations and philosophy that has nothing, it's like, it's your body and your sexuality isn't separate from this, but you don't dive into that sexuality stuff until you're extremely advanced. So it wouldn't really be given to Westerners at all, unless you had some seriously good luck. Neo-Tantra, as I say, is more the stuff that emerged from Osho and this more kind of populist stuff that happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and that's got a very heavy focus on sexuality. And this is where you might see lots of clips, or perhaps you've seen it on the internet, of people doing like eye gazing and heavy breathing in couples to kind of whip up the energy, and lots of like making big sounds, and it also includes things like intimate massage, so yoni and lingam massage, where you're massaging genitals. And there can be healthy neo-tantra. There are some good teachers out there who are very well equipped and trained to deliver that, and who really understand these distinctions between neo and classical. But there's the vast majority of people don't, and they will call their work tantra out of ignorance, and also there's a lot of cultural appropriation mixed up in this. So I'm a firm believer that you don't need to start worshipping Hindu deities and stuff that's completely out of your cultural upbringing and knowledge to be able to explore this stuff. That can be very beautiful if that's something you're drawn to, but it's not a requirement. And the danger in these circles is that it dehumanizes you, because in the environment I was in, we weren't men and women, and it was there was a lot of this polarity talk. So men are like this and women are like that, and you can't be any of the other. So for women, we're supposed to just surrender and let go, and if your man gets a new job and goes to the other side of the country, then it's your duty to drop everything and follow him and to nurture him and put his needs first. And it was basically just like 1950s dressed up with some glitter and, and skimpy outfits. It's the best way I can describe it. It was very, very disempowering for both men and women, because men weren't given space for their emotions. They had to be the hero and be strong and hold their stuff together. And there was also a lot of focus on moving energy up, and pushing it up, pushing it up, pushing it up, which is perhaps useful and supportive for 25-year-old men, it's not so useful and supportive for a woman my age who's now 49, because well, for a lot of women in general and vulva owners, we need some energy in our lower energy centers, because that's where our center of gravity is, and that's actually where our power is. I can feel I'm going off on a tangent here. So coming back to the abusive side of things, there was, as I say, this very distorted view of masculinity and femininity. It was also very homophobic, and it was also extremely transphobic as well. So it was damaging in those ways. And on top of that, women in that environment were being groomed. We were groomed to think that to order to spiritually progress, then you have to have sex with the guru, because he's the one who can awaken you and can heal all your shit. And basically deferring to men and override. There was a real strong encouragement on overriding all of our body's natural wisdom, and that if you were not attracted to somebody that you were told to sleep with, then it was because your chakras were blocked or that you've got a blockage and you need healing. And the way you get healed is to go and see the guru, who will heal you with his holy cock, which like now sounds utterly ridiculous, but there is still a lot of this out there, and it might not be that extreme, but there are lots of schools and environments out there in this sexuality world where people are encouraged to sleep with assistants, to sleep with the teacher, that's considered normal, and that is a real abuse of power. It's a real abuse of power, and it's always the young pretty things that are the ones that are, you know, encouraged into that. So yeah, that's a little bit about the abuse, and more than that, it's the legitimizing of it. It's the everybody believing in this and encouraging other people to do that. So there was a lot of women who were also swept up in that and encouraging other women to get involved in that as well. We were also taught that menstruation was bad for us, so we were taught very extreme practices to try and suppress our menstruation, and there was something wrong with us for bleeding. So any environment that is kind of telling you what to do with your fertility is also very dangerous as well. Any environment that encourages you to do lots and lots of practice, to basically have very little free time, to have a say on your food, your diet, your lifestyle. All of these things are kind of red flags. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's a short answer.
Yeah. How would they get you to suppress this menstruation?
So that kind of got brought in after you'd been in the system and in their teachings for quite a while. It's not taught necessarily right at the beginning, because people would freak out for obvious reasons. But once you were brought into that, there was a change in diet that would support it. So lots of extreme fasting. There were very specific yoga techniques that were supposed to help with that. And I fully bought into that, because up at that point, like, menstruation had always been something that I'd felt was, you know, I had terrible periods and I'd had a lot of pain in my life with it, and found it really debilitating. And so I was like, yes, sign me up, great, I don't have to bleed anymore, awesome. And I didn't realize until afterwards how damaging that was, and also then feeling like a failure every month, because, well, actually we're all still bleeding, but nobody's really talking about it, because now we're holding shame about something else, that our body, another natural bodily function. So it was very twisted. Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you can go this far into it, but because I remember seeing one of your social media posts, and it was really great because you had actually been in that space. And from what I understand, this guru and the practices are it's on a Netflix series, is that correct? And I don't know, is that Netflix series actually promoting it, or is it talking about the abuse and what happens?
No, they did. Though I can't even remember the name of the show now. It was last year or the year before. There was a series came out where they looked at a lot of different wellness type things, and one of them was an episode on tantra, and so it did expose the damage that was done in that school, and it also showed some other practitioners as well. So it gave kind of a good bird's eye view of the good, the bad, and the ugly that's out there. And it was done in a way that made it allowed the viewer to kind of make up their own mind. So it was quite cleverly done. Yeah,
Oh, right.
yeah, yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
So, what made you realize something was not right and to get up and leave? And then I'm interested to dive into your healing journey, which I think will take us into
Mm.
more of the work that you do.
Mm. It was a slow, gradual process for me leaving that environment. It took me about a year. Like I was deeply unhappy, but it was also that's where my whole community. I had nothing outside of that community. It's where, and then I just as I was getting ready to leave, I then fell in love with somebody there, and that kept me there for a bit longer. And yeah, it was really difficult to pull myself out. I knew nothing but that environment, and it was also because I was operations manager within the school there, that was my income as well, and the community I was running workshops to that were in that environment as well. And so it was very challenging. And then there was a lot of stuff that started to get exposed within the school, and it was like they couldn't paper the cracks anymore. It was literally like the veil got lifted from my eyes. And I can only think that was pure grace. So as the management team, we started to realize there was a lot of financial stuff that didn't make sense, to put it politely. There was a lot of money disappearing, and when we looked at the figures, it was eye-opening. And so some of the management team went public within the school trying to expose this, and that's when the backlash really started to happen. And as that happened, I then had to really look at my own story, which I'd been unwilling to look at, and that's that I had been abused by this teacher. And I'd kind of I'd shoved it down and kind of not wanted to look at it. But these things come to the surface when they're meant to. And so it was just like, I was just horrified. It's like, okay, I've got to leave. So I did. And I left. I left the school. I stayed in Thailand for a bit longer, which is where the school was. And then I moved to Australia and just started my life from scratch. Luckily, I was already, I was already running stuff. I was already working with clients. I was doing body work. So I moved to Australia, and then discovered these other teachers who really supported me in unraveling from the inside out, and really starting to get my body wisdom online, which had been offline for 5 years. Yeah.
Can you take us through a bit of your healing journey?
So the embodiment stuff was really, really helpful, because that gave me the tools to start to discover for myself what my truth was. So what am I feeling in my body? How does this feel? What is going on here? And because I'd been told what to feel for 5 years, so that's quite a process. I had to question everything. And every single, and I was a yoga teacher, and I'd been teaching their form of yoga for 5 years and immersing myself in it fully with 3 hours of practice every day. And to take on every single yoga posture and ask myself, does this feel good? Is it making me feel nauseous? Am I getting like a creepy crawling feeling under my skin, which was a thing that was very, very common when something was not right for me, but I didn't know what that meant. And that was the part of the process. And in fact, now I can't even practice yoga. I just had to drop the whole thing. I had to just go, okay, this is not something I can do anymore, because I keep getting flashbacks, and it keeps taking me back into memories of things I don't want to remember. So I had to just drop that all together, and I got some very good support. I worked with some amazing healers, everything from therapists, shamans. I had a shamanic exorcism. That was really, really helpful. To just to really clear this out of my system. Yeah, it was a deep journey, and through it all, there was this, what drove me forwards was, I don't want anyone else to suffer like I have. And I want people to be able to do their own self-inquiry. And I want people to have the skills to be able to speak up and say no, and to know what is beneficial and what is harmful. And that was just so hugely profound. It was incredible. It was a really beautiful journey of reclaiming. Yeah, very, very powerful.
Wow, what a turnaround.
Mm.
So you said that you used to do body work. Did you used to do internal pelvic work with people as well? And is that something that
Yeah.
you still do?
No, I stopped doing that years ago, because I mean it's really profound work. There's a lot of deep healing can come from that. But what I came to at the end of the day was, I was getting too many people coming to me who just wanted a quick fix, and had all this deep stuff going on. And yeah, you can unlock a hell of a lot in an internal bodywork session. And I saw incredible transformations in people, but I wanted to be able to support them more deeply. And through shifting from bodywork to coaching, and particularly working online with people over a long period of time, I was able to support them so much more, able to take them so much deeper, and really be able to honor the pace of their body. And so that's been really, really beautiful and profound, and so empowering for them to be able to take this wisdom and explore it in the comfort and safety of their own home, in their own privacy, and then come back, report back and go, well, I explored this, and I found this, and what do you think this means? And oh, I'm not sure if that was my cervix that I found. And to be able to debrief, and have those conversations with people, and to support them with the embodiment pieces as well. It's a much deeper, transformative experience, and that people are really able to integrate. And that's much more rewarding for me as a facilitator as well.
Oh, I agree. Like, I wondered if I was ever going to be able to get shifts with people without putting my hands on them, cracking their joints, sticking
Yeah.
a needle in them.
Yeah.
But, when I was forced into the online space, or chose to
Yeah.
get into the online space, I was like, wow, this is way more powerful. And I know
Mm.
I put my hands on people. And I think the shifts are much deeper, because people would just be like, can you just stick a needle in it? It needs to be cracked, rather than feeling into the discomfort and the emotion that's underlying.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's lovely working with people when they're in the comfort and safety of their own home. They're in the space where they feel the safest. They're in the space where they do their practices anyway. And it really helps to anchor that for them, which is lovely. Yeah.
Mm. Now, let me just look at some of the words that you wrote that we can explore. So, anything about female pleasure, sexuality, empowerment, embodiment, and orgasms. So, based on that, I think probably the best place to go is, what do people normally come to see you for? Like, because some people might be a bit lost on all of that.
Yeah, yeah. So people come to me often because they, as I said earlier, they know that there should be something more than what they're experiencing, but they don't know what it is. Or they've been in a partnership for a long time and they're feeling like things have got very samey, and they're stuck in a kind of routine, and or they've lost their sex drive, or they're feeling really flat. Or sometimes people come to me and say, I'm just up in my head all the time, and I've just disconnected from my body and my pleasure, or I've not been able to experience orgasms, or I keep hearing about all these amazing G-spot and cervical orgasms, and I don't know what they are, but I know I want to explore them, and I want to know what my body's capable of. And so I've worked with everyone from age 18 through to women in their 70s. So it's really it's really awesome. Yeah.
Mm. And do you work with people who have experienced sexual trauma? And I guess it's not just sexual trauma, is it, either?
No, everybody's got some stuff in their history, whether it's trauma with a big T or a small t, and it can be anything that's, it can be, yeah, it doesn't have to be just sexual, as you say. So it depends on the level of that trauma and whether it's still active and fresh or where they're at in their journey. I'm not a trauma therapist, so I'm very clear on where my line is on that. So that's something I have to have a conversation with somebody about before we talk about working together. And so, yeah, it depends on where they're at, but there's normally some stuff in the background, and that's why with my approach we really focus on creating safety in the body and working with the nervous system first before we dive into let's start finding your G-spot and everything else. It's like they might not, what's really common for a lot of people is that from an early age we haven't been taught what is our true yes and what our true no is, and often we've all had experiences where we've overridden that, or we've had boundary violations, or we've had experiences where we were drunk and didn't really, you just went along with things, or whatever it was. And so it's really important that we do this kind of rewiring process of starting to really deeply listen and go, well, am I ready for this today? Is this something I really want to, to do? And am I getting a yes from my body? And sometimes that means that then people have to honor not being ready for a few months, and then they end up having less sex than they thought they were going to have, because they've got to finally honor that no and wait till the body actually says, yeah, okay, now I'm ready. And that can be part of it sometimes, but it's also incredibly empowering when that happens, because when you do get a yes, it's a full-bodied yes, and it means so much more. So yeah.
Wow, let's dive into orgasms. Probably
Mm.
I'll go for the last thing I think everyone's wanting to know. So, can everybody achieve an orgasm?
Yeah, I don't like the word achieve. Let's say experience, because this is half the battle. Is we've got into this paradigm in this society where sex has become very goal driven and orgasm has become very goal driven, and you're less likely to experience it if you're coming from this goal oriented perspective, because it's like it becomes this elusive thing that gets close, and then the more you fixate on it, and it can then disappear and dissolve, and can leave you feeling frustrated and feeling like there's something wrong with you and you're broken. I want to just really be very clear that everybody can experience orgasm, and if you haven't experienced orgasm yet, then it's okay, and that you can. And I've worked with many people who've never experienced orgasm till they're in their 50s and beyond, and have experienced it actually quite quickly once we start working together. Yeah.
That's probably the other question. You probably can't
Yeah.
answer it. People will be like, so how long does it take?
Yeah, that varies for everybody. And this is why I don't like to work with people for less than 6 months, because it can take time for the body to unravel and unfreeze, and for people to discover for themselves. And then for some clients, they get breakthroughs very, very fast. So it really does vary for everybody. And it's a journey. It's not about the destination. It's more about loving yourself at this really deep level, and learning about yourself at this deep level, and giving yourself the patience to go at your pace, which is often challenging in our society. So giving yourself patience, giving yourself the time to explore, and not leaving your pleasure as something on your to-do list that never quite gets done, because we have busy lives and everything else, and everybody else's needs come first. Well, that's, you have to prioritize your pleasure if you want to experience breakthroughs. It has to be given the space and the devotion and the attention that it requires. Yeah.
Okay, prioritizing pleasure. What are the
Mm.
different types of orgasms that are available to
Oh,
be?
there's so many. Yeah. And different people, different schools will tell you different things. So, I mean, there's clitoral orgasms, which are the ones most people are very familiar with, and that's what most people know about. And even then, there's a large number of people with vulvas that only experience clitoral orgasms, and there's a lot of people who've never experienced that, and there's a lot of people who can only experience clitoral orgasms on their own and not with a partner. So I want to just say, if anybody watching this is in that category, that is, you are very much the norm. So that is very, very, very common. We also have the wonderful world of internal orgasms. So within the vaginal canal, there's in the internal world, there's a lot of different areas which are incredibly pleasurable, and people can experience orgasms from very specific places. So that's why I talk about G-spot orgasms. People can experience orgasms from the cervix, which are incredibly profound. And this is where we get into the really deep, multiple, cosmic, expansive, trippy experience that feels like you just dissolve into oneness with some form of divinity. It's really hard to even describe. I had a call yesterday and somebody asked me about this, and I kind of got lost for words, because it's so nuanced, and it's so, everybody's experience of this is so different. But yeah, it can be quite psychedelic for some people, and it can last for hours for some people. It can also be really subtle and really kind of refined and almost like a meditation. So it varies for everybody. But then you'll hear about other orgasms. So some people experience anal orgasms, there's full body orgasms, there's energetic orgasms, there's all these kind of things. And so we can get really stuck on trying to unpack, well, what is this? And then that can take you out into your head, which is going to pull you out of the experience. So I think it's helpful to talk about orgasmic states and being in an orgasmic state, and you can experience that drinking a hot chocolate, or sat in the sun, or having an amazing bath, or a beautiful massage. There's so many things that can feel when you awaken all of your senses and really tap into a deep level of embodiment. Like, your level of what feels pleasurable goes through the roof, and so all these subtle things can feel very orgasmic. So yeah, it's hard to put labels on things when we get to that stage, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's just good to know all the varieties that are available for
Yeah,
experience.
yeah.
Oh, all right. So sexuality, power, this is something that you talked about. Like, how is sexuality, sensuality, feminine energy, and power and money all connected?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So it comes down to, as I've kind of touched on, this sense of knowing ourselves deeply, and knowing what our yes and our no is. Because when we're able to do that, and that's why a lot of the work I do is through embodiment and through really getting to know your body and to trust the responses of your body and your system. This is then where it gives a greater confidence to be able to say, yeah, that feels good to me, or actually, no, I'm not aligned with that. Whatever it is, whether it's wanting to meet up with someone, or someone invites you to do something, and it's like, oh, hang on, the old me would have been turned into the people pleaser here and gone along with it and resented it. But actually, I'm going to say, no, I'm not available for that today, or that's not something I'm feeling like that would nourish me. And it's giving people the tools and the confidence to do that, which helps you to create healthier boundaries. And as this all starts to awaken in your system, and you start to tap into your pleasure, it gives you a sense of feeling more empowered, and not in this kind of bratty, entitled kind of way, but it's just this deep knowing of who you are and what is good for you and what isn't, and where you want to go in life. And I've seen clients go through such huge transformations with this. So things like just quitting. I had one client who quit her legal career and moved to a whole new city in France and take up photography as a career because she'd just been so deeply unfulfilled. And as she moved through this stuff, it's like, oh, that's not what I want to do anymore. And I've had clients completely transform their existing relationships through just knowing themselves better in this way. I've had clients go on and completely change the kind of men that they want to be in relationship with, and change the kind of their way of relating and cut old patterns and habits. I've had clients who've deeply shifted the wounds with their mothers and their ancestral lineage through this work as well. I've seen people, like, where it takes clients financially is often amazing. I've got one client who 2 weeks after she experienced her first cervical orgasm, which she said she could feel for days afterwards in her energy system, 2 weeks after that experience, she signed 5 new clients and brought in a hell of a lot of money. It's just really amazing to see. It's like, boom, like the lid is off. It's like, because just as we have a glass ceiling financially due to the conditioning we've grown up with, whether that's patriarchy or capitalism or a sense of worth and our upbringing and the stories our parents had around money, the same thing's true with pleasure. So it's the two can be interconnected, because it's our capacity to hold more and our capacity to receive more. So that is also true of holding bigger spaces, being able to work with clients more deeply. All of this stuff is connected. Yeah.
So interesting. Actually, one question that just pops up into my mind is, there's a lot of shame around sex and exploration, especially for young kids. And I notice that, sometimes for boys, it's from the age of 6, and then for girls, like sort of like tapping in around the age of 8. Do you have anything to say about that, or how parents could approach these conversations in a healthier way?
Yeah, and with girls, actually, well, for all kids, it can often be much, much younger, so 3, 4, and often when I talk to clients, they'll say, I've got memories of innocently touching myself at a very early age and being shamed for it, and then feeling there's something wrong with it, or parents not even being able to use words for genitals without that being something encoded in that. Like, I remember, like, your privates, or down there, or the words that get used for this. So there is
What words should we be using?
That's up to you. I wouldn't want to tell anyone how to parent, because I'm not a parent myself. So, but what I know a lot of my friends and clients will do is, start to talk to the children and use the anatomically correct words, so that they get an understanding. Yeah, or vulva and penis, because the vagina is the inside, the vulva is the external, and so many people get that mixed up as adults, and it's true. And that can be really helpful. Or what can be fun is finding a word for, and we all have difficulty with this stuff, adults as well, about finding, especially for female genitalia, finding words that feel empowering and beautiful. So maybe there's something there for the kids to come up with something themselves and name it themselves, that feels nice and feels beautiful. I'm just throwing that out there as an idea. But my friends with kids have had great inroads in kind of just really encouraging them to tell them that this is a natural part of your body and there's nothing to be ashamed of, and when you're older we can talk more about what these nice feelings are and what that means, because pleasure is often something that gets chopped out of this at a very early age, and that's where the shame gets really deeply encoded, is that I'm being told there's something wrong with me, that this isn't something we talk about, but it feels good. So there's a split there straight away, and so it's finding approaches to work through that and around that. Yeah,
And it's quite often the parent that's got some blocks around it as to
yeah,
why
totally.
that as
Yeah,
well. Mm.
yeah, definitely. And that's what gets passed down. Yeah.
Okay. Just wondering if I want to ask anything else on that, but I think
Mm.
that's enough on that. So then you talked about prioritizing pleasure. So can you give us some tips on that? And what does pleasure mean to you? Because some people will just be thinking, okay, self-pleasure, sex, but it's not just that, is it?
No, that's a very, very good point. And this is a lot of the work I do with clients. It's like, what's the everyday pleasure in your life? Is it, like, I'm looking at my desk, so I've got an essential oil here. I've got a beautiful picture in front of me. I've got a cup of tea. I've got my favorite socks on. All of these things give me pleasure, make me feel good. I'm wearing velvet trousers, and I love the feel of the fabric, and I love to stroke my legs while I'm on calls, because it makes me feel grounded and alive and connected in with my senses. So all of these things, pleasure is so much more than just intercourse or self-exploration. And I think it's really important that we widen our perspective of pleasure and really orient to that, because if you see it as something separate to the rest of your life, it's not going to integrate. And it's when we integrate it with the rest of our lives that things really shift. And it doesn't need to be a separate standalone practice. So all of the time you can ask yourself, how does this feel in my body? Am I enjoying this? What makes me feel good? What can I do more of that I like doing? Whether that's going out for a walk, whether it's cuddling your pets, whether it's singing or dancing or any of these things. These are things that enliven you and make you feel good, and that's what we want to encourage. And things like, mindfully eating and enjoying, and this is my weak spot. I bolt my food down so fast. Yeah, and I have to continually remind myself to slow down and savor the textures and the flavors. So things like that can be a really lovely way of just bringing in more pleasure without it needing to take up more time in your day. Because particularly if you've got kids, or you're running a business, or you're working, like, there's only so many hours in the day. So looking at where you can orient more towards pleasure is really, really helpful. And then at the same time, it's like optimizing the time that you do have. So if you are a busy person, what's something you can do for 5 or 10 minutes that's going to really make you feel awesome? So for a lot of my clients, that's dancing, or this is where the embodiment practices come in. And it's like, if you can do 5 or 10 minutes every day, that's going to completely shift your mood and make you feel so much better. So then it's a case of, well, when's the optimum time for you to do that, and working with your own schedule to bring that in. And also, self-pleasure and exploration. It is important, if you want to experience deeper orgasms and more sexual fulfillment, you need to devote some time to that. So, and it's finding the time that works for you, the time when you're feeling most relaxed, the time when you're not exhausted. And so sometimes that's, for some of my clients, that's all right, everybody's gone to school now, and I'm just gonna give myself half an hour. The dishes in the sink can wait, and that takes a reframe of the mind to stop beating yourself up and say, okay, that can wait. The world's not going to end if the dishes stay in the sink for another half hour. It's these things that we need to kind of look at. And sometimes that requires us being less rigid, and sometimes it requires having a bit more structure, depending on the kind of person you are. Yeah.
And so how would a woman know that they're ready to start exploring this? Because some people are like, well, I'm listening to this and I'll do this before I talk to Mangala or before I explore this work. Like, how do you know when someone's ready? Because I know you screen your clients.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if someone's reaching out, then it's a good indication that they want to know more. Or if you're hearing this and it's sparking something in you that makes you feel like, oh, this is me, this I do want to feel more of everything. I want to be happier. I want to feel more empowered. I'm tired of living life on 40 or 50%, or living in the gray zone. I want to feel more fulfilled, and I don't know what that looks like. That's a good indicator to think, well, let's see, let's see where you're at, and let's see what's possible. Yeah.
I've got two questions that are hanging on my mind, and I'd love to just hear a little bit more about your facilitator training as well, so that I can just remember them. One is about like movement type work, and then also partners and how they get involved. So let me start with the first one, movement, because I don't see you on Instagram like dancing sexually and all that kind of stuff, and I sometimes think that can be a little bit intimidating.
Totally.
So what is
Yeah.
because it's like, and some of these people are my friends and they're really beautiful and I know who they are, but I just know that maybe me a few years ago would have been like very intimidated by watching someone move that way.
Yeah, it's not my jam. And it kind of leads into the facilitator training, because it's a big thing that I talk about, is that you don't need to be on Instagram in your underwear to, to work in sexuality. And I've created a very successful business for myself not doing that. So I just want to state that. Because it's not about how you look, it's about what you're feeling on the inside. And I'm not knocking the people who do the sexy dances on Instagram.
I mean, sometimes they look amazing and it's like,
Yeah,
keep on watching.
yeah.
But it's
And
like, do I have to do that to access embodiment work?
No, because that makes it feel really far away for some people. And it also makes people feel, well, my body doesn't look like that. I'm not young and skinny and white and beautiful, so therefore this work isn't for me. And so I stand very far away from that. And so the embodiment practices that I give to people, it's pretty much all done with your eyes closed, if that feels comfortable to you, because it's really not about the external and how it looks. It's about really just getting honest with what's there in the body, and following what feels good, following different pathways, following different lines of inquiry, so that you can because for me it's about authenticity, and it's about really just being in your truth. So that's why this work is relevant for everybody, regardless of your age, your weight, anything else that can put you off exploring this. And sometimes the most profound experiences can be just sat with your eyes closed, really gently exploring, rotating your hips, or stroking your face very lightly, or the back of your neck. It doesn't need to be some big orgasmic goddess stuff, yeah.
That's good to know. Good to know. Then the other piece is like someone's feeling a little bit vanilla about their intimacy with their partner, but sometimes people hesitate with even just like personal development, because it's like, well, the change that happens. So if someone was going to embark on this work and they weren't that open with their communication with their partner, like what would you suggest, and how do you bring the partners on board?
Yeah, well, I always offer, because I'm not a couples, I don't work with couples, but I always offer my clients, when working one-to-one, I always say, if your partner wants to come in and do a session, I'm totally open to doing that as part of this package. Now, it very rarely happens that they do want to do that. Sometimes it's enough for them to know that their partner is wanting to explore more, and that in itself can lead to some very interesting conversations. So I have had clients who, it's not easy to turn around to your partner and say, I'm feeling unfulfilled, and that I know there should be something more to this, and I'm not feeling sexual satisfaction, and I want to invest a lot of money to explore this. Are you on board with that? That is a sticky conversation to have. But the clients that have had that conversation with me and have with their partners and have started working with me, it's amazing to see the shifts that happen with their partners through this process, because as you as an individual get more confident and comfortable knowing what works for you, it is so much easier to communicate that with your partner. And that's something I support them with, in ways of how to approach that, and to how to communicate that, and to explore things they can try together that might, some of the practices are non-sexual. So it depends where they're at, because some partners are like, I'm all on board. Yeah, what are we doing today? Right, we're gonna massage each other for 10 minutes and give feedback. Great, okay, I'm in, sign me up. And then other partners are like, you do your thing, and I don't want to know, but the intimacy has shifted, and they're reaping the benefits, and that everybody's feeling more connected, because the partner who's doing the work is much more able to articulate when something's going well, and that, as well as when things aren't working, and that helps to really shift the communication, the non-verbal communication as well as the verbal communication.
Yeah, the energy. And that's like the work, as you say, it's like what's happening on the inside is reflected on the outside, and people feel that, and they can, the non-verbal communication. Okay, so one more question popped up, and it could just be as a very simple answer, but S&M dominatrix type stuff, do you dive into that?
If that's something a client is interested in, I'm happy to talk about it. I don't shame anyone for any of and I don't yuck anybody's yum, basically, and I've had clients who've been very deep in the kink and S&M world, and found it very, very rich and fulfilling. Sometimes I've seen people gravitate towards that as a trauma response, and that's something that might need to be unpacked. But it's different for everybody, and I've seen some clients have really amazing experiences in that world. I would say in general that the kink community has a lot better understanding of boundaries and consent and communication than the Neotantra world. So there's often a lot more communication, a lot more talking, a lot more being very clear of what is okay and what isn't, and that's very healthy.
Great. Well, okay, tell me a little bit about your facilitator training, because I know with my work, when I'm training practitioners, they have to be an existing practitioner, but what is your facilitator training and who can access it?
So it's called Embodied Female Pleasure, and it's a 10-month program. And it's beautiful because we spend the first 3 months of the program purely diving into your own pleasure and your own embodiment, so that you can really feel it in your body before we start to look at how do you actually facilitate this work safely. And it's for people who maybe they're already, I've worked with a lot of people who have got different modalities. So I've worked with GPs, I've worked with naturopaths, massage practitioners, wellness coaches, yoga teachers, trauma therapists, sex therapists. So people don't have to already be in this industry to do the training. But if there are a lot of people in this industry who are not trained. So I'm more than delighted to bring people in who want to upskill and really learn it from a very embodied perspective. I've also had
clarify, you don't have to be a practitioner. You could
that's
be
right.
a lawyer who wants to start maybe looking at facilitating this work with people.
Totally. And so it can also be people who are just at a point in their own journey where they're ready for a fresh challenge, and they're feeling like, and they're not not fresh off the boat, you've done some work on yourself, or you're at a point in your own journey where you're like, you know what, I'd love to take this out into the world. I've always had this, this feeling in the back of my mind that I'd love to work with women or vulva owners, and I'd love to do something around sex, and I never knew quite what it would look like, or never quite found the right person. So it's, you don't have to be an existing facilitator to do this work. And it's a beautiful deep dive. I bring in guest experts to teach on trauma, to teach on holding space for people from marginalized communities, so particularly how to make spaces more inclusive and safe for Black and Indigenous women of color. And also we have a module on cultivating trans safety. So I'm really passionate about bringing in guest experts in these fields to support the training, and you also get really thorough training on how to facilitate. So whether you want to do group programs, whether you want to do one-to-one work, whether you want to run workshops or retreats, and whether that's online or in person, this gives you the practices, the tools, and the experience to be able to, and the training to be able to do that as safely as possible, and to then incorporate it into whatever modalities you've got. So everybody's taking this work out into their own communities and delivering it in their own way. So some people are working with mums, which is, mums who are exhausted and really want to reclaim their pleasure. I've got other people who are working with women in midlife. So it's like you really get to take it and make it your own, which is really excellent. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. When does it start?
We start this week, so I don't know when your podcast is actually going out. So we start on the 20th of January, and people can still enroll up until the second call is the cutoff date. So that will be the latest you could possibly enroll is going to be the 3rd of February. Yeah.
Okay. I think I can get it out. Before then, people might be enrolling like 24 hours after this.
I've had last year I did have somebody sign up literally as we were going live on that second call. So it was like the payment came through like 2 minutes before we went live, and they hopped straight on the call. So it's possible. Yeah, totally possible. Yeah.
So you do the facilitator training, and you also work with people one-to-one, minimum 6 months.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So how can people find you then?
You can find me on my website, mangalaholland.com, and you can also come and hang out with me on Facebook. I'm more active on Facebook than I am on Instagram at the moment. That's just where I naturally feel more.
Is it your personal page or is it a business page?
Yeah, the link I've given you is my personal page. You can also find me under Mangala Holland on my business page, but I'm mostly active on my personal page. There's something different about it just feels more personal. And I like building community, so yeah,
Facebook does not let your business page get seen very easily.
No, this is true.
Well, I will pop those links in the podcast notes so people can reach out to you. Do you share anywhere else? I mean, you did a summit. I was honored to be a guest at the summit. What else? Do you just put stuff out there throughout the year that people can?
Yeah, totally. So I do every year. I'll do a speaker series. So for the last 2 years, it's been called Vagina, Pussy, Vulva: Lifting Taboos of Our Sexuality, Power and Wisdom. And I also run group programs throughout the year as well that are not facilitator training. So I think the next one coming up will probably be in March. That's a 6-month group journey called Orgasmic Confidence. So there's lots of stuff coming up. And if you go on my website, you'll find a free 3-part video series that you can download and just get a bit more of a feel for my work as a little taster. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll pop the website link and maybe that direct link in the podcast notes as well.
Yeah, great.
All right, so any last words that you've got for my listeners around pleasure, embodiment, sexuality and orgasms? What would you like?
I would just like to leave you with the knowledge that you are, no matter where you're at on your own journey, you're not broken and you don't need fixing, and that there is always more to discover. Because what I really what's really amazing about the female body and pleasure and orgasms, especially female orgasms, is pleasure is infinite, and there's always, every experience is new and different, and so this stuff never gets old. There's always more, there's always deeper levels and layers to uncover, and more pleasure to be found. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing your rounded wisdom on so many topics today. I knew that we could just jump on and just roll with the conversation. That's what I love about you, Mangala. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Great conversation. Thank you.